You want the people who think they have a shot, who can self-select and have a shot. But they won't have a shot every single time, right? They won't be the Isaac Newtons or the Einsteins of the world who can solve all of these problems, right? You want, depending on the problem, the right set of folks to show up and say, yeah, I think I have a solution for you, and I'll submit it. And for them, the cost is very different. So typically they're spending about a week's worth of time creating the answer, but that time is not, they don't see that as a massive investment, right? They're sort of trying to learn and have fun along the way as well. So that's the first question. On the second question about what happens to intellectual property if somebody has a solution and so on, that I'm going to defer to the platforms, because the platforms have various different rules on how to deal with that.
And let's do 2 more questions. I think Vic has a question there.
Yeah, this is Vic Welsh at GE. The Eco-Imagination Challenge, to help mitigate some of the losers' feeling, you have a self-select poll. So it's open forum, so we have both a collaborative and a competitive situation. Yeah. So you can actually have, the People's Choice award winners, as well as the things that are stimulating to us. And that's the way we try to keep everybody engaged.
Let's do one more in the back there.
Hi, Julie Shannon from Girl Start in Austin. We've worked with IBM to try to, we haven't ever done an open competition, but one of the problems that we came up against was the programmers, the software programmers creating something for Girl Start. The attorneys wouldn't let them do it because their IP and all of that. So who are the people joining these competitions? Yeah. Are they unemployed? I'm just curious.
Yeah. So
are they students, or who are they?
They tend to be, in a world of 6 billion people, not all of them are locked up by IP regimes that sort of limit activity. So it's 2 answers. One is that they tend to be professionals working in domains where these things won't interfere with their work. Many platforms have agreements where if you are employed full-time, then they will check with your employer to get clearance for the IP before they'll release that. But that has not been an issue, because basically, if you imagine you're at Pfizer or you're at Merck, you're so locked up in the employment contract that you can never participate. But there's lots of academics, lots of other people with degrees that can still participate and do well. That's the first thing. The second thing is, there's a strategic question, like, should you allow your employees to participate or not? I used to have these big debates when open source came out, because IT managers would say, I don't want my programmers working on open source. Why would they be doing that, right? I go, yes, but then they can be surfing porn sites. Right? You have a choice, right? Are they going to engage their minds and learn and help you, and there'll be positive spillovers, or are they going to waste their time and surf illegal sites? So that's the choice. We know that if we keep our workers engaged, if we give them interesting problems, they will get more satisfaction, right? And in many of these settings, self-selection, them having the choice to pick the right problem to work on, counts for a whole lot. And unfortunately, again, we're shifting, the world is shifting and sort of saying that knowledge workers are motivated and incentivized in different ways, and we need to create the institutions that can support that, including, the ability to work on a different project at a different company. And I think the SAP example is very interesting, because the SAP has built out this 2 million strong network, and they have systems integrators. These are competitors, so Wipro, IBM Global Services, Pricewaterhouse, and so forth. Their employees are on there, and they're answering each other's questions and answering questions from customers in a wide public domain area, where they're saying that, we signal our quality to the rest of our customer base by our employees participating, and our employees also learn a lot that can have positive spillovers. But again, it's not common sense, right? I mean, we don't teach this yet at the business school, saying, let your employees work on the competitors' products. Great, thanks so much.
Thanks very much. That's a great presentation, and I think always helps get us anchored in the whole idea of competitive innovation solutions. So you'll hear a lot more about it today from different speakers. Next, I'd like to introduce Pascal Finette. He's also our Innovation Lecture Series speaker today that we combined into this whole centered presentation. He is the director of Mozilla Labs, where he works with a talented team of engineers on inventing the future of the web. He loves technology and believes internet is deeply impacting mankind. He got started on the net before there was a web browser, founded a couple of companies on the internet, led eBay's platform solutions, but mostly he simply loves to do cool stuff on the web and work with great people. So, Pascal Finette.
Thank you. Good morning. Let me start it with a little anecdote. So I was at the Space Center yesterday and got a tour and got to see both the space shuttle mock-up as well as Soyuz. And it kind of like made me aware of the fact that whatever Karim showed you, and I'm sure other speakers today will show you, is basically the space shuttle, really beautifully engineered, amazing piece of technology. Whereas Mozilla really is more like Soyuz. So we are flying by the seat of our pants, and what you're going to see is kind of like, I let you into the secrets of how we engineer and architect this thing, which is Mozilla and is the Firefox web browser. But don't expect miracles. It literally is like Russian space technology. So with that being said, what I want to talk today about is 7 insights we had, 2 problems which come with that, and then a little bit talk about a couple of thoughts about the future. It should just give you a little glimpse of like what keeps me up at night. So you heard about me, I'm coming for Mozilla, I'm coming from a really weird background. My background is in economics, and most of the Mozilla people are engineers, so I'm usually like the odd one out there. One thing you need to know, what I'm going to tell you is there's a big warning sign with that. So whatever I'm going to tell you, your mileage will vary. So don't take my word as like this is the way you should go. It is the way it works for us. But Mozilla is a very, very unique beast. So take this into account. And let me give you a little bit of context. So Mozilla itself we are a public benefit organization. We are a mission-driven organization. We are a community of creators. And we are probably most well known for producing Firefox and Thunderbird. Some people at NASA actually might come across another product we happen to build, which is Bugzilla, which NASA is one of the largest consumers of it, other than us, for bug tracking and issue tracking. There's a different view, and I find this pretty hysterical. So Fox News interviewed John Lilly, our former CEO, and identified us as the search engine next to Apple and Microsoft. So the last time I looked, we didn't do either a search engine nor did Apple. But then, having said that, having our CEO on national television with like holes in his jeans might have tripped the Fox guys. So it's really important to know, we have a very, very simple mission. It's about promoting choice and innovation on the internet. And really, like, that's it. It's so simple. But if you think about it, the web itself is too important to not have someone as a steward of it who looks after it and keeps it as its heart. Because the web enables like so many things, as you're surely well aware of. And there's a whole debate about net neutrality and like access to the web and bringing web to other countries. And you see stuff like the Great Firewall in China, and all these kind of things. And we are very concerned about these things and try to help. A little bit about the Mozilla history. So Mozilla is basically the successor of Netscape. So you might remember Netscape Browser, which was the first like commercial successful browser back in the day. Netscape didn't do terribly well after their initial IPO. They were bought by AOL. AOL wanted to buy Netscape because they wanted to have the server software, and they ended up with this thing, which was the browser, and AOL really didn't know what to do with it. So there was a group of ex-Netscape employees who decided that it would be a really interesting experiment to take this Netscape code base and open source it. At the time, that was revolutionary. So nobody had done that before, like take an existing piece of like 1 million lines of intellectual property and open source it. So there was a lot of resistance. But the guys succeeded, and they created the Mozilla Foundation, which then became the steward of the Mozilla code base. And in 2003, I believe, we rewrote the browser and created Firefox. At the time, it was really interesting because Internet Explorer had a market share of 99 something %. So basically, the internet was done. Microsoft owned the internet. And the more important thing is that Microsoft at the time decided to divest. They were basically saying like, it's done, it's fine. So they reduced the Internet Explorer team, the team who worked on Internet Explorer and innovated on the product, to 0. There was not a single person working in Microsoft working on the Internet Explorer. So the central piece of software which allows you to access the internet had no innovation. And that's clearly not a good outcome. So we were very motivated to do something about that and created Firefox. So Firefox today is a product which is used by roughly 400 million people. We are edging toward 500 million. We've got 25% market share global. In countries like Germany, we are now the largest browser. So it's a tremendous success story. The more interesting piece about that is that this success story has been made possible by currently a staff of only 350 people worldwide. So the kind of like the joke is, every time I get like someone into my team, I'm like, okay, so here's a computer, and here's 1.5 million people you have to be responsible for. Don't screw them up. The more important fact is that still 40% of our code base is community contributed. So other people other than us write this code. And we've got a huge community around Mozilla. So we've got, there's this, what we call the order of 10. So you've got like 350 people basically on staff. You've got about 3,500, 4,000 people who are hardcore contributors, like writing code. You've got about 40,000 people today who are helping us debug this code by testing it, using our nightlies, so the product we release every single night. There's a community of about 400,000 people, which is currently edging toward 2 million people who use our beta products and give us feedback. There's community on Translate, et cetera, et cetera. So it's a tremendously interesting community story. And I'm going to talk about a little bit of how we got there and probably what you can learn from it. So with that being said, let's go back to the 7 insights and the 2 problems. So first insight is, and this is really, really important, at least when you're a software company, only superior products matter. So when you look at successful companies, they all had amazing user experiences. So you've got Firefox, obviously, but you've got Wikipedia, you've got the Apache web server, and even the iPod. When Apple brought out the iPod, there were plenty of MP3 players, but like nobody actually captured this user utility so well. So the core message is, without excellence in experience and the utility, all the rest is meaningless. This is something which is really important for us, like to ingrain in everyone we talk to, because if we are not building an amazing product, we can do whatever we want and we can stand on stage and tell you about like how important the web is. It wouldn't matter, because we don't have the seat at the table, because we don't have the product there. So the second one is more an organizational part. So for us, what we do is, as you can imagine, if you're only 350 people, you can't have a command and control structure. So what you need is you need to push your decision-making to the edges. And that's a frightening thing, because you suddenly give people power who you probably barely know. But it's also very, very empowering. So there's a term coined by Dees Hock. Dees Hock is the founder of Visa, which is called the K-ort. And K-orts have a specific set of attributes, meaning they have a distributed decision-making. They've got something called nodal authority. So you're basically segmenting your decision-making into nodes, push them out, and give those nodes authority. And there's always ways to route around. Interesting enough, and the crazy picture you see in the background is a mapping of the internet from a couple of years ago. This is exactly how the internet itself works. So if you take one server out of the internet, it doesn't matter. Like there's ways for other servers to connect around this. So if you're interested in this, I really recommend this. When you go to Wikipedia and look up Dees Hock, there's actually an article, an essay he wrote, linked from there about his principles. It's very, very worth reading. So the idea is, the term is basically a mixture between chaos and organization, which is exactly how we work. Like oftentimes I find myself in a world where I'm like, oh my God, how did that happen? Because it's totally chaotic, because you have very little control over it. At the same time, by giving your decision-making powers to the outside, You allow people to be very creative, to root around you and find their own ways to do things. So in Mozilla terms, this means we have a very clear, and this is important, you have a very clear understanding of what your core values are. So everyone in the Mozilla community understands what we stand for, and we make it very obvious, and we make it very clear, and we talk a lot about our core values. So like everybody's on the same page, basically. We have a system which we call the modules. So Mozilla, the software, Firefox software, breaks down into hundreds of modules, software modules. And the decision-making power lies with the module owner. So if you're the module owner for, let's say, the password piece in Firefox, that's where you make the decision, which is interesting. So when you talk to someone like John Lilly, our ex-CEO, he will tell you he was like the only CEO in the country who actually couldn't make a change to a button in Firefox. If he's not the module owner, he can be as much CEO as he wants to. We give the authority to the module owner. The other thing you find is the moment you start like segmenting people is that groups have very, very different ways to work together, and we just acknowledge that. So we just let them do. Instead of saying like, this is the way you have to work, we just let them work the way they want to work. What you also find is that there's a lot of decision-making then outside of your like official org chart. So the whole stuff happens on back channel where people like decide stuff. And then, as you can imagine, communication in this scenario is essential. Like if you don't communicate, you die. So taking that point, the learning you have around communication is communication happens anyway, so you can't forbid it. Like there is no way you can control communication. So you better make sure that it's reusable, that people can find it, that it's easy for people to do so. And we do this in a whole bunch of ways. So what we find is like people literally communicate in every way possible. So we installed this, I'll give you an example. We installed this really nice video conferencing system, which allows us to hook our central office in Mountain View in California to our satellite offices in Vancouver. People like it and people use it, but there's a whole bunch of people who just go on Skype and use Skype video chat because it's more convenient and they can do it in the coffee shop and whatsoever. So instead of us going to them and saying like, hey, we spent $20,000 on this system, you have to use it, we're like, whatever, use Skype, it's fine. Bill us for the Skype credits. We use a lot of wikis, which have advantages and disadvantages, but they tend to work for us. We use a lot of blogs, and the scary thing for us is, and that's kind of like very unique, I guess, to Mozilla, is that not only the information disseminated on the official Mozilla blogs, but even more so the information which is disseminated on people's blog who are in the Mozilla community is important. So there's a thing which we call Planet Mozilla, where we aggregate all these blogs together. We call it the fire hose. When you subscribe to this thing, you really literally get like the whole breadth of the community. And it's really interesting because a lot of people blog on their personal blogs about very specific aspects of the project, and it gets pulled up into this Planet thing. But it's not like in any form edited or went through the PR machine. So has its advantages. Sometimes like people blow up on the blogs and you have to deal with the outcome. But overall, we find that the openness of it has clear advantages. As mentioned, we use a lot of Mozilla. It's our own tool, but it's kind of like a love-hate relationship. It's pretty powerful, but it's not super nice to use. We use something called IRC, which is some internet old-timers might remember this. This is internet relay chat. It's basically live chat and news groups. And then increasingly, we use voice and video. And the picture with the young man with the glued-on telephone is actually, this is Mike Beltzner. He's the head of Firefox. So he's the guy who kind of sits on top of all the module owners. We bought him a headset recently. The other thing we do is we get people together. So as good as we are as a virtual organization, as good as you can be as a virtual organization, we find tremendous value in getting people into the same room. And we do this both on like module areas, so just getting 10 people together, like work week style, as well as like getting the whole company together. As well as getting together with our community. So one of the big events we do is we bring the 350 people staff and 350 people from the community who are like the most active community members together for a whole weekend of basically work and fun.